Girls, do y'all remember this?
Now, girls, I know y'all remember this alum powder, but what if I told you the same chemical was being baked into your bread? Yes, this is way deeper than we thought. In the 19th century, if you lived in London and bought a loaf of white bread from your local baker, you were likely eating chalk, not a speck of flour dust, actual chalk. The same stuff you used to write on a blackboard. But here's what I didn't expect. The government knew about this. They passed laws against it. And yet, somehow, it kept happening for over 100 years. Let me back up. White bread had become a status symbol. If you were wealthy, you ate white bread. If you were poor, you ate dark, coarse bread made from inferior flour. This wasn't just about taste, it was about class. The whiter the bread, the higher your social standing. So bakers had a problem. Good quality white flour was expensive, but everyone wanted the whitest loaf possible. The solution? Adulteration. By the early 1800s, bakers were adding chalk, plaster of Paris, bean flour, ground up bones, and something called alum to their bread. Alum is an aluminum-based compound we now use in detergent. It made bread appear whiter and heavier, and it allowed bakers to use more water in the dough so it felt more substantial. Some bakers even added sulfate of copper blue vitriol to achieve the same effect. Now, I want you to understand what this meant for ordinary people. Bread wasn't a side dish in Victorian England. It was the main food. For the industrial poor, bread made up as much as 3/4 of their diet. So when you adulterate bread, you're not just cheating people, you're poisoning them. Here's the thing about alum, and this is where it gets personal. If you're a woman in your 30s or 40s, you might remember this name, alum powder. Same chemical. Potassium aluminum sulfate. In the early 2000s, if you were in certain communities, Latina, African, immigrant communities, you probably heard about it. It was being recommended informally as a vaginal tightening method, something you'd mix with water, something to make you feel tighter for your partner. Same astringent properties that made Victorian bread look whiter, that drying, shrinking effect, were being used on the most sensitive part of a woman's body. It was never safe. Medical research documented that women used alum for the purposes of vaginal tightening to enhance sexual pleasure for the partner, to make the vagina younger, or to hide evidence of infidelity. But the consequences were catastrophic. Doctors reported cases of vaginal ulceration, burns, pH disruption, infections, even scarring that required surgery. One gynecologist warned it can cause scarring and might even require surgical interventions to open up. Repeated use could cause the vaginal walls to become rigid, and they can then tear when they give birth. And here's what the research makes clear. Alum does not tighten the vagina in any meaningful way. It offers only a temporary and illusory sense of tightness. People did it anyway because someone said it worked. Girls, do y'all remember this? Let that sink in for a second. Same chemical, different century, same pattern, and the government? Back in the 1800s, they knew. In 1757, Parliament passed the Making of Bread Act, which specifically aimed to punish anyone who adulterated meal, flour, or bread. The act was introduced after a report accused bakers of using alum, lime, chalk, and powdered bones to keep bread white. The law didn't work because enforcement was almost non-existent. In 1820, a chemist named Friedrich Alum published a book called A Treatise on Adulterations of Food and Culinary Poison. He famously wrote that we could exclaim with the sons of the prophet a sound says, "There is death in the pot." He documented convictions for the use of gypsum, chalk, pipe clay, and alum in bread, and yet it continued. By 1874, newspaper articles were still listing the substances used to adulterate flour in bread: alum, ammonia, beans, bone dust, chalk, clay, plaster of Paris, potash, rice, and more. They marked many of them as used almost universally. By the 1870s, Dr. Hassel had demonstrated that half of the bread he examined contained considerable quantities of, while not itself acutely poisonous, by inhibiting the digestion, it could lower the nutritional value of other foods and cause chronic malnourishment. The thing that gets me is this, the justification. Bakers claimed they couldn't make bread white enough without alum. They said it was necessary. But it wasn't true. Contemporary writers pointed out that the utmost beauty, sponginess, and sweetness may be given to bread without the addition of one particle of alum, provided the best materials alone enter into its composition. This wasn't about necessity, it was about profit, and consumers paid the price. One historian put it bluntly, one thing the Victorians loved was profit, and the way to make profit was to use the cheapest ingredients and charge a high price for them. There's a pattern here. The same government that passed laws against adulteration in 1757 also in 1977 told Americans to replace butter with margarine, a product that contained trans fats that we now know were actually dangerous. Same pattern. Incomplete evidence, policy becomes dogma, and it takes decades to correct the mistake. When I investigated the food pyramid, I found the same things, policy decisions made with incomplete evidence, driven by agricultural economics as much as health science. So here's my question. If we knew in 1757 that alum in bread was poisoning people, and we still couldn't stop it for over 100 years and then we turned around and used the same chemical to tighten vaginas in the 2000s, what are we getting wrong right now that future generations will look back on with the same disbelief? If today's investigation made you think differently about the history of our food system, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you remember the alum powder trend? What stood out to you most? Leave a comment below. I read every one of them. If you're enjoying this journey, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in researching how modern food changed us.